Hi, friends. It's been a while and happy to reconnect again. I would love to talk today a little bit about the process of awakening and what is the awakening process. So, coming out of a few sessions with my clients today, and really feel inspired to share. Have a sense I'll probably be talking for a while today because there is just a lot of energy inside of me right now. And if I were to define, thank you for joining. If I were to define the awakening process, I would say it's the process of waking up and waking out of fear. So the process of awakening, it's not something that happens in one day and in one moment, but it's a gradual taking away of the clothing, and the name I would give to the clothing is fear. Physiologically, on the level of the body, the way the body reacts to different life situations, on the level of the mind, because most of the mental chatter and the way the mind has been conditioned is to survive. Most of the mental chatter is connected to fear and the fight or flight response. And also on the level of emotions, which are largely defined by fear-based and resistance-based, and then everything else. So the process of awakening is not easy at all. And what I'm seeing with people who go through the process, and having gone through it myself, is that it's something that takes time, tremendous amount of patience, and also a very dedicated work on being present and allowing yourself to really differentiate what is fear and what is not fear. And what is not fear, you can call it anyhow you want. There are people have different terminology for that. It's not important necessarily to get lost in terminology. What is most important is to know that it's this feeling of relaxation and a feeling of trust. And what is not fear, you can call it energy, God, universe, flow, soul, higher self. It doesn't really matter. And the what I'm feeling just right now, what I'm feeling energetically, it's just millions of people who are going right now through this process of awakening. And at the same time, frequently it's misconceptualized and probably viewed as a mental disease, because very frequently it's misconceptualized with maybe some symptoms that are connected to schizophrenia, or things that are related to kind of visions, or things that are maybe a normal person, like whatever normal is, like more traditional person who is more connected to the mind or mental processes, hears voices, feels sensations, feels energy moving through the body, and maybe seeing parallel realities, or even moving into past lives, future lives, different ways of perceiving the world. And so all of this in the mental world and this in the psychiatric world would be considered as diagnosed as a mental condition. And so for that very reason, many people who go through the awakening process, they are shy about sharing about their experiences with family members. What I've also seen by working with different people is that somehow the awakening process almost strikes one family member rather than the entire family, unless you're very lucky, you're born in a specific family. But it's almost like one person awakens within a family, and that person becomes a unit for influencing the entire family constellation. And so in this way, it's quite fascinating. It's sort of like little stars within families, within different communities who are waking up. And the reason for that is because once one person begins to awaken, there's shedding of the fear-based response that does happen. And when this process occurs, it begins to influence all the people within this family constellation, because within a family, we are connected on the level of the heart, which is love-based relationship. Whether you have easy relationship with your family members or harder relationships, but heart and love, unconditional love that connects us to the family members, is what helps the family members begin to awaken as well. And through that process, we are healing relationships between human beings. And so my sense, and it's really difficult to talk about the certainty of all these processes, because whatever I'm sharing right now, it's very much kind of an intuitive download and intuitive information. But my sense from speaking with my teachers and being through this process for many years now is that where the universe and where the earth is moving is in the kinds of relationship that exist between people that is not necessarily fear-based, but is more creativity-based, or at least I call it creative process, more connected on a more of a creative type of relationship rather than fear and exchange-based relationship. And so what is happening in that case, when one person awakens, the layers of fear begin to shed, and it takes years and it takes a while and a lot of conscious work as every person is moving through this awakening process. And then it begins to affect other family members, because now the relationship is based not on necessarily a manipulative way of being. I will love you if you are 1, 2, 3, or I will give you this if you do this to me and that to me. So it becomes the process that is rather intuitive and collaborative. Not quite the way that majority of this planet still functions. And so I see that for many people, it's a painful process. The reason for that is because the process of awakening is generally not quite accepted just yet in mainstream culture. Most institutions, educational, political, cultural, work establishments, they are very much based on this old ways of structures, which is fear-based mentality. The idea behind that is that person doesn't have free will, and a person cannot make decisions for himself or herself. So all decision making is outsourced to a hierarchical way of structure. And within that hierarchy, there is an idea of, kind of the way that families used to run in the past, which is one patriarchic person who is making decisions and then family members following that person. And the same structure has been pretty much replicated in other parts, political, cultural, and social parts of the world. And so it is really challenging to see how those structures begin to shift and change, simply because there are very few models of different kinds of relationships. In the parental and child type of relationship, most decision making has been given to a parent and not to a child. So given that a child doesn't have the muscle to exercise decision-making skills of choosing what kind of food he wants to eat, what kind of dress he wants to wear or she wants to wear, the idea behind is that that muscle of exercising free will is not developed. And so for many people, awakening happens at the time when they're later in their life, like past the puberty age, in their 20s, let's say, or even later 30s and 40s. And so it's challenging to exercise the muscle of free will at that time point because it has not been developed for 30 or 40 years or for a few decades. So we're talking about a muscle that is atrophied. And fear that is being, fear response and the fear reaction that happens through the awakening process, it's not necessarily, let's call it not objective. It's not that it's not objective, but most of it is that it's the fear of exercising the muscle of making decisions. For generations, we haven't been given a chance to make decisions. It's something that is challenging to take responsibility for different paths in life, or from anything from buying groceries to choosing a life partner to making political decisions. And the the challenge behind this is that we start exercising the choice muscle and the free will muscle. It really taps into all types of insecurities that we do have. The first being, I don't trust myself, I am scared, and I'm not quite sure if the choice that I make right now is going to impact my life in the future at some point. Because often the way we've been taught to make decisions is to make decisions out of fear, and that has to do with how can I prevent damage for myself? How can I ensure my survival? So part of the awakening process is also realizing that life itself is not terminal. We're not dying as the physical body dies. And another aspect of it is that because we're able to tap into different dimensions and to different realities at the same time, we are able to communicate with beings who do not live in their physical bodies. And we are also able to tap into our past, like past lives, and also have a lot of influence on the future. But when that fear of death begins to dissipate, decisions that a person who has gone through the process of awakening is making in his life are going to be very different. They're not based on survival. They're based on thriving and creativity, which is quite different from the functions that most structures and establishments hold in the society, which are primarily based on survival. If you think about political structures and educational structures and economic structures, plus relational as well. If we go back to the family nucleus, within a family, the idea is to preserve the family nucleus within a specific, partnership, partners, children, parents, etc. And so it's interesting. It's really fascinating to me to be a part of and just seeing people awakening, working with clients who are awakening, and myself being in this process, because very much we are building a society towards the way of being, which is not largely known to anyone. And it's very much an intuitive process of going in that direction, which I can share from my personal experience, having been on the journey for 10 years now, is that at times it's been very challenging and scary for me personally. And so it's the process of working against my own survival response, and how is it that my body can trust so much and drop so much into this flow of trust that the decisions that I do make on a daily life are not based on self-preservation. Extremely challenging. Physiologically, I also want to describe something that happens physiologically, and something that my attention has been drawn quite a bit lately is the area of the stomach, belly. And metaphysically, this is the area that is connected, Highlands, it is connected to our belly, our emotions. And emotions are probably one of the most challenging things for people. I'm using the generalization of we are a society that stays away from emotions, and emotions are largely misunderstood and misinterpreted and not necessarily expressed. But emotions are imperative for the awakening process. There are several reasons for that. One is that to be intuitive, you must be connected to emotions on a very tender, gentle, and accepting level. It's not a fight of emotions. It's not a kind of a reaction to emotions, but accepting the feelings and experiences that you do have emotionally in such a gentle and loving and holding way that it's almost this, I can only think of God-like energy that is holding emotions in such a tender way. We do have reactions to our survival, and no matter how awake you are, there is this sense of endearment that you have towards your body and endearment towards your story and your life path that has a lot of tenderness. And so connecting to your emotions from this place of tenderness and gentleness, it's not something that is advertised. Emotions are on a large scale banned. If we take a workplace, we wear masks, and this mask presumes that you're not even a human being. So when I speak about spiritual awakening, I'm also speaking about this tenderness towards humanness, which is not really allowed in the workplace and in communication between the people. When you come to work, you have a professional identity, you wear a mask. If you are having a bad day, or if you are having a headache, if you have an emotional reaction to that, it is not allowed to express it. And what it does, I want to bring your attention to what it does really. It really brings a part of your psychic to not accepting yourself as a human and as a spiritual being. Any kind of resistance you have towards the emotional reaction to what is true in the present moment doesn't allow for this fear response to crack open, so you can connect deeper to your spiritual being, to your sense of inner knowing. So going back to the belly, the belly center has several functions on the metaphysical level. So the emotions is one of them. Emotions have to do with, let's call it again very roughly, there's a lot of degree of granularity, but very roughly, fear versus not fear. And so as you start connecting to your belly, you begin to tune in into what feels as a fear-based response. And how is it that you can be so gentle with this fear-based response rather than pushing it away and saying, hey, I don't want to function from this place. How can I bring more love? How can I bring more tenderness and more gentleness into the part of me that is still scared? Because let's face it, we have been conditioned for generations to be scared. And so whoever, you and many other people, even if you do one thing during the day that is going to bring more love and gentleness into this part of you that is scared, it means you are awakening. Some people have crazy experiences of awakening that really has to do with Kundalini energy moving through them, or very strong experiences of the psyche opening and the body opening. But those experiences are not the only parts of the awakening process. Those can be present and they're strong, and often people cite those processes as the actual process of awakening. But what really is happening through the awakening process is that it's a really micro steps that each one of us takes on a daily basis. I take them on a daily basis, and many other people do. And the gentler we are with ourselves, the gentler I am with myself, is this part of me that is still scared. In different kinds of circumstances, it can relax. It can drop more into trusting. The significance of this process is really difficult to underestimate. I don't think my mind really can conceptualize the impact that awakening has on the civilization. It's really beyond my mental capacity to see that, to be honest. But what I know is that we're moving into some kind of direction that connects people who are maybe choosing to live their life from a place that is not fear. And the micro steps, whether it's a physiological reaction or a non-reaction in the context of connecting to friends or family, or changing our work circumstances, maybe pursuing your dreams, maybe choosing to travel. Those seem like trivial experiences, changing a diet or picking up a hobby or breaking up a pattern or changing a job. Those seem to be rather trivial. I remember just many people saying, or even some of my clients I'm thinking about, like, okay, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal that I'm doing it. It's not a big deal that I'm starting my own business. It's not a big deal that I am breaking this relationship, and instead I'm going to give myself a few months of just being with myself rather than out of fear of being alone, rushing into romance or sex. And on a larger scale, all of those choices we make that gives honor to the part of us that wants to be listened to and treasured and healed and given love. All of those, it's on a larger scale, it has an impact on every single person on this planet. It's the butterfly effect and from quantum physics that a flip of the wings of a butterfly has an effect on everything else in this world. This is how much this impact is. And what else is there to say about the awakening process? Gosh, there is just so much. Coming back to the belly, I would love to finish that thought. Coming back to the belly, another important aspect of it is the health, the belly health. Let's put it that way, the gut health. Belly is also a center of intuition. Intuitive knowing, this seems to be the way in which we develop as human beings to act intuitively and to act from the place of intuition. And so far, most of our society has been trained to function in the mind. Most of education is geared towards working with the mind and developing rules, a series of matrix rules that if we follow those rules, we'll end up at point B if we start at point A. This has been a part of the evolution where we've built the prefrontal cortex and the decision making kind of going like physiologically. There is a fight or flight response at the primal brain, which is more in the base, evolutionary speaking. And later developmental parts of the brain are our executive functions and the prefrontal cortex, which has to do with thinking of brakes in the car. If something has a fight or flight reaction and it goes into the fight or flight response, which is our old part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex is the one that puts the brakes on this reactive state of being and making decisions. And so what is interesting is that much of this prefrontal cortex, as it has developed in the last thousands of years, part of it also has to do with logical decision making and being able to predict the future. And it's also the part that creates a lot of stress for many of us. And stress is connected to the physiology of the fight or flight response, because the amount of information that we carry right now in the modern world is overwhelming. And I know that in educational systems, we just keep learning and consuming information, but on a practical level, there is less of the enjoyment of day-to-day life. And so it gets really challenging to function in a way when we're purely relying on logic to build our lives and develop our lives. So there is part of the executive functioning of the brain, which is wonderful, and we can build logical systems and automated processes for automated checkout in the register in the pharmacy or in a supermarket, or we can have other things that are automated and they make our life easier, like a washing machine or a toaster. Amazing creations of the modern world. And at the same time, to be able to know how to turn that part of our brain on when we are solving a logical problem, and at the same time rely more on the intuitive way of knowing. This seems to be the next step of the evolution for a human being, which is connected to gut and is connected to the digestive health of us as human beings. And so I think that probably this will be maybe geared towards the end of what I want to what wants to be shared through me today, at least, is that food, and there are lots of different thoughts about, okay, what kind of food you need to eat as you go through the process of awakening. And it seems that there is really no one way. Many people say, oh, I need to go vegan or vegetarian, or I need to only drink or be on a liquid diet, which is, there's really no one way of eating healthy or maintaining and supporting the awakening process. But I think what is more important is that our relationship to food and paying attention to our body is one of the first steps in which we can start developing the intuition, because the body frequently tells us what it needs. And I know many people who have been on vegan for years, or they go through a process of being vegan and then they change their diet and then they eat meat and nothing else, or eat meat and veggies, or they eat chocolate for 2 months nonstop. So it's kind of crazy, like as all this process is going in circles and changes. And so the idea behind it being the relationship with food is one of the first types of relationships that can help to develop intuition, because it's asking the body over and over, what do I need right now? It draws you into the present moment. It requires you to listen, and it requires to develop self-respect and ability to make decisions for yourself. And it's an important part of relating with food, because it builds free will, it builds trust that is also connected to the sense of gut and personal identity. And it also develops this sense of I can trust myself and my body, which I don't think many of us had this ability as children growing up, to actually being able to trust our body and to be able to trust this inner sense of knowing. So I've been playing and experimenting with this gut and intuition training for a while now, and seeing how more and more people, as they go through this process of awakening, they begin to trust, and the sense of decision making shifts from external to internal. I make decisions, or I am a part of this intuitive decision making process. And so the end message is just to encourage you to facilitate this awakening process within yourself. And it may be through relationship with your gut, with your food, with your emotions, and with self-trust. I feel this is pretty much it of what wants to be shared today, of what I want to share. So appreciate you for joining, and so much love, encouragement, and tenderness, and joy and creativity, and all the love and best wishes your way. And love yourself. As always. Until next time, bye.